April 14, 2022, regular meeting of the Central Circuit Board of Education is called to order. First item on our agenda is prayer, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I would like to ask all that would like to please stand as we pray the Lord's Prayer together. Remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. Our Father,
who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory. Amen.
thank you for remaining standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next item is approval of our agenda. Dr. Hooker, are there any changes to our agenda?
Mr. Chairman, there are no changes to the agenda.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to accept the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, please say aye. Motion carries unanimously. Agenda is approved. And now we have the next item is our fiscal year 23 budget work session. I'll turn this over to Dr. Hooker and Mrs. Cross, our CFO.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Cross, will you please come?
All right, good evening. Tonight is our first budget work session for the 23 fiscal year budget. Tonight will be a broad overview of the budget. The state has a lot of changes regarding our QBE revenue this year, and they're working hard, both midterm and the next year budget has a lot of changes with salary changes and the supplements. So they promised us that we will have it hopefully by the end of next week, but by the end of April for sure. So at our next work session, we will have an actual line-by-line detailed budget. So first we'll begin with revenue. And this is just a quick snapshot of revenue. We'll talk a little more in depth about these on the next slide. And I've linked each of these with our strategic plan as we go through and the initiatives we have defined for each of those. Our net M&O digest is expected to increase 15%. I spoke with the Walton County Tax Commissioner just last week, and he said we do have a healthy increase in our area. For us, that would mean a revenue increase of $566,000. That is if we were to leave the millage rate at the current rate, which is 19.278. Our quality-based education, which is the bulk of our revenue from the state, is estimated to be at $14.4 million next year, which is about $1.2 million more than the current midterm. Now, most of this is due to the $2,000 state increase that will be to the state certified salary schedule. We did have an increase in FTE, so we account about $400,000 of that increase to that. Also, the state, with the midterm, which we'll look at tonight during the meeting, did remove the austerity cut, which is an additional $480,000 for our district. On the next page, I kind of just got some projections based on our digest, and as we move through the budget increase, to keep in mind some options that we have. The first is the 15% digest increase. So if we do realize this 15% increase at our current millage rate, and the gray where it says net millage, those will be the changes. So at 19.278, as I discussed, that would be about 4.3 million net taxes levied, which would be an increase from the prior year of about 566,000. So we have a couple options. The first would be the rollback rate. The full rollback rate would be what rate would take you back to the amount of net taxes you levied in the prior year. So for us, we would need to roll back about 2.515, which would get us down to 16.764. So what that would do is have no total net increase to your taxes. The next two options are partial rollbacks. And I just use a couple as a guide to give you some options. The first one would be rollback to about 17.5%. That would still give us a net tax increase of $166,000. And the third estimate is at 18 millage rate. and that would give us a net increase of $278,000. On the next page I took all of our Northeast Georgia school systems and kind of did an analysis of where we are compared. So the first column is student enrollment, and we are the smallest system in our RESA. There's a couple that are, similar. Well, Commerce City is actually a little smaller, and there's a couple that are kind of similar. And then the next is the school millage. So this is the school millage rate compared to others. We are on the higher end of that. Bond millage, so districts have the opportunity to bond an additional millage rate. Take for instance, we are going to use our SPLOST proceeds to bond for the building of our school. You can also take an additional millage levy and use those proceeds to actually pay your bond payments. And so that was, I think, about 4 districts in our RESA have done that. The next is the M&O digest levy. So this is the value of those properties levied in these particular districts, and ours is the smallest levy. The third is a taxes levied. So based on that digest and their millage rate, what taxes were levied in the prior year. And then the next to last column is dollars per bill. So for every mill in that particular district, how much does that bring to the table? So for our district, for every mill we levy, that brings us $196,000. And as you can see, it's one of the smallest ones. The last is dollars per FTE. So that is actually our digest, what it brings in per our FTE. And so for us, that's about $1,946, which is on the lower end. For us, we are kind of a unique situation. We do have intergovernmental agreements with Walton and Newton. So when we say the tax follows the student, for us, that kind of happens because of those IGAs. So in all fairness, on the next page, I wanted to include those amounts. We do. Even though they're not true ad valorem tax we collect, that is how the calculations are done for the IGAs. So when we take into account that top column is when we look at that in addition to our taxes levy, it does bring our dollars per FTE to about $2,909, which is, a little higher, more in line to what some of the other districts.
Can you go back to the previous page and compare that 29 to the previous page?
Okay. Go back to this page. So it goes from $1,946 per FTE to $2,909. So about $1,000 per FTE increase for our district. The average, if you look at this slide, you just got to take out green because that's just an anomaly. That doesn't happen in most instances. Their digest is just huge. But if you look at all of the other, the average in our RESA is about $3,400 per FTE. So when you take into account our IGA with those districts and what it comes out, $2,900 isn't totally off, but it is, on the lower end. On the next slide, and so I just also have those analogies when we talk about our millage rate, and if, we want to roll back what that does to that dollar per FTE, because I think a lot of times we need to look at it in the big picture of what that is doing, and it is funding our students.
The middle column, rollback.
The middle column, rollback. You notice it was on a different page.
On the next page? Yes, so the estimated 22 digest.
The middle column says rollback.
Yes, rollback. That would be the full rollback. So
Yeah.
my estimate.
That would be the only way we would avoid public hearings.
Yes. You would have to do the full rollback. So even if we say we want to lower our millage rate and we want to go to 17.5, say, it's still considered a tax increase. So we would have to do the hearings because you're not doing your full rollback. Full rollback would be totally no addition of tax increase, no additional revenue to your district. Are there any questions about those slides? On the next page, we have, I've done an analysis of our QBE the last few years. So looking at FY20, all the midterms until what we get to in the FY23 estimate. So the top column, our FTE, that is what drives our revenue. So that is what drives how much money we are paid per student from the state. There's different buckets, different amounts per FTE, but this is the main driving factor. And because of that, we have increased our FTE, and so we generally, over the last few years especially, have had an increase in our QBE. If you look at the last column at the very bottom, if we look at last year compared to this year, our QBE earnings per FTE are going up about 617 per student. So that has allowed for some additional teachers this year, and also the funding that will come through. Yes.
Can you give us just a quick snapshot of how our staff administration has been able to maximize that?
How our staff has been able to maximize that.
Yes.
So there's a lot of planning of the master schedule and how you can best maximize. So we don't earn FTE, we don't earn funding just for having a student. But one student, depending on what bucket they fall in, if they need gifted, if they need or special ed, if they fall into certain categories, workforce, CTIE, by maximizing and knowing how to create a master set schedule correctly, it will optimize your staffing potential. Am I saying that right?
That's correct.
Okay, yes.
And
And
is
so-
there something to it about matching also your personnel, your teacher to that type of need?
Yes, yes. And so the last couple of years, there has been a lot of professional development on that and how to best, because when you maximize that and you maximize your FTE, you're in essence maximizing the number of teachers you earn.
Right, I'll speak up on that. Thank you, Ms. Cross. There are some instances you only earn in a general ed class 15, if you have 15 students or more in the class. There have been instances in the past where we had 9 and 10 students in the class, and we were really not earning the maximum amount to fund those classes. So I believe a year or so ago, we brought in an FTE expert who worked with our staff on how to maximize class sizes,
Yes.
working with our special ed population. There are different sizes you have to have based upon the exceptionalities. With your gifted, if you have a teacher who's gifted indoors and teaching a class with gifted students, a maximum of 5 students, I believe, 5 to 6 students in a class, that increased the amount of revenue that you get from the state as well.
And it's 5 or 6 gifted students in the class with a gifted indoors teacher.
Correct.
Correct.
And there's
And we
25 kids in the class.
Yes, and we've offered teachers to go back and get their gifted certification. We paid for that in certain instances. And I think this year we've done a bang up job. Dr. Brewer and her team have worked with us. Nicole as well as HR has been a part of that to ensure that we're maximizing our budgets. So we've increased it quite considerably over the past few years.
Thank you. It's very encouraging. Thank you.
Okay, are there any questions on the overall picture of revenue and where we're headed into the next year? Okay, the next page starts some expenditure highlights. So our biggest expenditure for our district is obviously salaries and benefits. One of our strategic plan items was to have a quality staff and provide professional growth. One of the great things about the state's budget this year is it included the final $2,000 increase to the state certified salary schedule. So those will be implemented in the beginning in FY23. If you remember last year, our local supplement, we increased to 12% last year with a promise to increase at 15% this year. So this year, the recommended increase will be, the local supplement be 15% of that state base, and it will be 15% of that increased state base. So when I look at that for our average teachers, their increase this year, we're on the low end, go from probably about $2,400, and on the high end, could be anywhere as $3,500, $3,600. And it depends on their education and years of experience. So that is a good thing for our staff. Also, our classified salary schedule. We have been working hard, and last year we had our first kind of salary schedule that was provided for our staff. This year we've finished conducting all of our job descriptions. We've got a job description for every person in the district now. But what we've done with this is the 5.9% increase started because that's the cost of living raise kind of that the state, the federal government was giving this year. But also what it does is that gets our minimum salary to $10 an hour. And our goal over the next few years, when we started this when we thought we were going to have to get to $15 an hour. But what we're finding is to hire quality staff, $12, even at your local fast food restaurants, is $12 to $15 an hour. So our goal, so we're not stuck with such a huge increase at one time, is hopefully over the next couple of years to continue increasing our minimum salary for our staff. Next, I believe it was Mr. Callahan asked about adding a Social Security benefit. The Social Security benefit would cost our district about $50,000 a month based on our estimated payroll, which would be about $600,000 annually. It also would be a cost to the actual employee of 6.2% of their earnings. John?
Is it possible if, and I'm not suggesting we do this or not, okay?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, y'all would make that recommendation. and
Yes.
discuss it, but if you were ever going to consider making the recommendation, I would ask that you might survey the staff prior
Yes.
to that.
We've talked about that because we know it would impact teachers. So it would definitely kind of be,
And you do it for everyone in Millage, is that correct?
Yes, we're still trying to get some clarity on exactly what options, because we did extend the benefit to paraprofessionals because their TRS benefit tends to be a lot lower, so we do provide Social Security for them, but I believe it's a full class or not a full class. So it'd have to be all teachers or not any teachers. Now is a good time to do it because they are getting a substantial raise if the district decides. I looked at an average teacher, if they're making about $50,000 a year, it's about $250 extra per check. With the increases that we're looking at, that's about $166 per check that they're getting just for that $2,000 raise. So there's a lot of components to Social Security. It's one of those, we do have employees who leave to go to other districts so they can qualify for Social Security, and then you vice versa, teachers who have been here for a long time that have no interest in that. So it is one of those things that will probably just take some time and we'll look at. Next is our TRS match. That has increased from 19.59 to 19.98. Not a huge substantial increase to us, thankfully, this year. About $53,000. No change in the required state health benefit contribution per employee as well. On the next page, we have operational. Some of our strategic plan were effective engaging instruction and assessment and enhancing our facilities to make them equitable and efficient. Instructional expenses are estimated to increase about 3%. This is due to an increase in enrollment. Transportation costs are expected to increase as well. This is primarily due to an increase in fuel costs. Connection classes, we've been able to add at the middle school, music course and Spanish, and we've enhanced the current offerings in art, PE, and business computer. Previously, middle schoolers were only offered a very limited schedule because we shared those teachers with the high school. So we've been able to offer these in full now at the middle school. And the high school gets the benefit of having those teachers all day as well.
And I think that would definitely help with the offering for our middle school students. They have 2 connection classes as opposed to 1. And it will benefit the high school so they can separate when it comes to coaching or PE. I think we were doing PE and at one time Spanish.
Yes.
And that is cut off, so we have 2 separate schools, which would be beneficial for our entire faculty.
And on the last page, we have some of our SPLOS projects. Dr. Crooker has met individually with each of you about some of these, but to just kind of speak about them, on tonight's agenda, we have, as part of our midterm amendment, the budget amendment, some of these items, because we'll need to begin some of these items in May, June, in order to have them complete for the new year. So these are going to be multi-year projects. But we're having addition of learning colleges, which will provide 6 additional classrooms at the middle school, high school. We are completely out of space, so we are going to add a complex of learning colleges behind our high school. We'll continue improvements and maintenance to our facilities. This year we'll be doing completing interior and exterior painting of the athletic complex, central office, and alternative school. We'll be repairing and replacing the very old carpet in several of our facilities and repairing and replacing tile. And we have just actually completed renovation of several of our bathrooms at the primary and elementary school, the floors. We'll be planning renovation of our elementary school gym. As most of you know, the facilities are unusable, and the middle school was unable to have several of their games at home because of that. We're also here in our activity center. We'll be replacing some of the stage curtains and enhancement to the sound system. We will continue our facility planning of the new elementary school, and we will look at planning for our new or updated existing facilities for the middle school in order to plan for the current and expected growth. On the next page, I just wanted to bring attention to our fund balance and over the last 5 years. As you can see, we had a slight dip in 2020, mainly due to COVID and hefty state cuts to our QBE. But we have built back up this year, and we intend again to end this year without using any fund balance and actually having some to put into our savings. So 15% is the minimum required state. We are currently at 15.6%, so we're getting there. I think after the end of this year, we'll be able to go a little more. So we're at that minimum amount. I've always said our goal should be 3 months of expenses. That will prevent that ever the need to have to do furloughs again, protect our teachers and our staff. That would need to be about more close to 4.7 million. So we're moving in the right direction, and I really think in the next couple of years we can get there. And the last page is just kind of a synopsis of our next steps. So our next budget work session is scheduled for May 5th. At that one, you will be provided a line item budget to review. We will have options when we talk about, once we know more about our QBE, we'll know more options about, what we want our millage rate to look like, what we can expect. Then we'll have our first hearing beginning on Thursday, May 12th. The tentative budget will be presented to the board at the Board of Education meeting on May 15th. And we will plan to have the adopted budget at the board meeting on June 16th.
Questions?
Are all of those slides we just talked about be available either in general or up in the city?
Oh, yes.
They're all done.
Oh, yes, they probably weren't on there earlier. I apologize. I forgot to send it to Carrie.
We were asking questions back.
Yeah, there are on Assembly now. This whole presentation is on Assembly,
Okay.
yes.
Are there any other questions from any other board members? All right. I want to thank you, Mrs. Cross. That was a wonderful presentation. It's very encouraging, actually. And I appreciate the way you linked it to the strategic plan as well. Thank you. All right, so do I have a motion to adjourn? Do I have a second?
I second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, please say aye. Motion carries unanimously. The budget meeting is adjourned. Thank you.